There was an article in Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine. Saturday's game is about between what Baylor is now and what it could have been, for better or worse. And the article basically says that based on this weekend, the game between Texas Tech and Baylor may be the decision where Baylor fans may think, well, maybe we made the wrong decision when it comes to Dave Aranda. I don't get this article. It talks about Tech has out-recruited Baylor, and then again talks about, yes, Corey Campbell has put up millions and millions, a former player in the NIL. Joey would not have had that at Baylor. And so Baylor's recruiting and NIL, yeah, they've been playing catch-up. We've discussed that many times. Baylor beat them 45-17 last year in Lubbock and humiliated them, really. And so I don't know if one game changes the wheel or the pendulum of who has made the right decision. Why can't both of them do it?
Yeah, well, they won the Big 12 with Dave Aranda. I mean, so, like, they had the best season in school history, so it was the right decision at the time for sure. And now, look, have things changed in the interim that, yeah, they've got the Matador Club at Texas Tech, and Baylor has GXG here. That's the Matador Club is ahead of GXG right now. That's just how the Matador Club's ahead of most when it comes to NIL and what they're doing. So, yeah, that's an advantage that Joey has. But look, right now, they're both 2-3.
Yeah. Right.
So, I mean, Baylor beat them last year at their place 45-17. So I don't think that this one is the end-all be-all for either one of these guys who have both had success. I think that's the epitome of hyperbole there.
Yeah, I think that's just trying to find an angle to spice up this game. I don't think it really needs it in terms of, the coaching decisions. I think both are fine with where they are. I know there's been a lot of heat around Aranda lately, but that at least cooled off this week with the win last week in Orlando. But I would say since Joey left, he left middle of the season 2 years ago, he was on the side, or excuse me, he was not on the sidelines, but he was in the press box or whatever at McLean Stadium as the Tech coach-to-be, having left the team and gotten started out there in Lubbock, and Baylor beat them in a close game, and that game launched them into the Big 12 title game.
Yep.
And so they beat them there, even though it was a bit of a struggle, and Tech came very close to spoiling the party. And then they went and won the Big 12, and they won a Sugar Bowl all without him. And then they turn around, and, yeah, last year sucked, but they still beat the heck out of Tech. And so I think it's big for Joey and company. A lot of those staffers, I'm sure they're licking their chops saying, we got to beat these guys. That's where we were, and we want to be better than them. And in some ways they have surpassed them, I guess, recruiting rankings and NIL money. But on the field, I don't feel like that's been the case at all so far. So I do think it would be a big deal for Tech to get a win here and probably feel pretty satisfying. But I don't think it puts them light years above and beyond where Baylor would be. And if Baylor were to win, same thing. I think they'd just be a game ahead of them in the standings, and Tech would still have the advantages that they have. And just maybe it's that Baylor has an actual coaching advantage or whatever you want to point to. But I think that they're a pretty similar footing, and I don't think that a win by either one this weekend, barring if it's like 45-10 or something like that, something extreme, I think they're both going to be pretty much in the same and similar spot. And I don't feel like there's sort of that bubbling up like there was last year, which is probably good for both teams because I do think Texas Tech kind of overheated with some of that last year.
You know what? The only difference I can see from these two teams right now on the surface is that Tech has looked better in their losses than Baylor has in theirs.
Yeah.
So Tech has had some close losses. Oregon was a close loss. Wyoming was in overtime. West Virginia was a closer game, although that one never felt like they were even in it, watching it, even though it was a close game. Like, they've had close losses as where Baylor's losses have been outside of the Utah game, straight up and down embarrassing.
Yeah, I do.
So,
sorry.
Yeah, so that's that fly.
Yeah, I do think that, a couple weeks ago, let's put it this way. Baylor has struggled as much as they did, but there's not been like, well, we should have hired Joey because Tech was also struggling the same way that they were.
Yeah.
Now, there was some of that last year until they actually played. And then it was like, okay, well, the head-to-head went a certain type of a way. But there's a crowd that was definitely in favor of McGuire being the guy for a lot of the reasons that he's excited Texas Tech fans, the recruiting part of it, the Texas ties, all those types of things. But I don't think results-wise it's turned into where people are like, oh my gosh, we really made a huge mistake. I think it's pretty even in that regard. But a lot of people wish him well, and there will always be people who think that maybe that should have been the right hire. But right now, there's nothing to say that it was the wrong hire either.
Is it fair for me to say that a lot of times when you hear Joey's name creep into the conversation, it's because of the personality and everyone acting like he was the energy, and Dave Aranda is quite the opposite, but that doesn't mean he's not a hell of a coach or a motivator. In fact, I asked him that on Monday. If you saw any of the behind-the-scenes video of Jeff Grimes at halftime, I'm not sure how many of you saw that. I think it's called Baylor Plus. I'm telling you, he got in the grills. He basically said, why don't we just get on the plane now and go home? Are you ready to do that? And the players responded no. And then they went out and took care of the game plan that they had and eventually came back and won the game against UCF. All right.
I think Joey's in a really good spot for him. I think it's been proven by the support he has. He just seems to fit out there. Now, he would have fit here too. He's going to do really well there. I still believe that. And I think they're building something, but I still think the same thing with Dave Aranda and Baylor. I know it got really dark the last couple of weeks when, losses were starting to pile up, but I think he's a heck of a coach. I still believe he's a heck of a coach, and I think, there's some deficiencies, but I'm not a believer that, they're not capable of being a better program than Tech moving forward. And I, feel like if Tech's a better program moving forward, that wouldn't be a surprise either. But, yeah, there's not much separation right now. Maybe there's a little created this weekend.
Speaking of Joey McGuire,